Hi, welcome. I wanted to do this. I just got back from an interview. Hopefully, wish me luck, job interview. But I wrote this over the weekend, and I'm really excited to present it. It's a work in progress. Um, it's about the Torah, the five books of Moses, the Pentateuch, the Chumash, however you want to phrase it. Now, I I wrote an essay, and I hope you bear with me. It's it's more than one page. I mean, it's really elaborate, and that's why I'm really excited to go ahead and read it for you. I'm making a documentary about this and a book called the Torah Decoded, or the Bible Decoded. Um, and I'll just get right into it because it explains it all. I'm real excited. I'm this is not a one and done. This is an ongoing intellectual investigation. All right. For centuries, scholars have debated the origins of the Torah, the first five books of the Bible. Who wrote it? Why does it read the way it does? The dominant academic answer for the last 200 years has been something called the documentary hypothesis. The idea that the Torah is a patchwork, four separate authors from four different eras stitched together by a later editor, a literary quilt sewn across centuries. But what if that entire framework is wrong? What if the Torah wasn't assembled from fragments, but engineered from the ground up as a single breathtaking act of literary architecture structure? What if one author, or I'm guessing a team of authors, sat down in one of the most extraordinary cities in the ancient world with access to the greatest library ever assembled and produced a text of almost incomprehensible sophistication? A text encoded at every level in its structure, its numbers, its divine names, its genealogies, even in the skip patterns of its individual letters, with a meaning that has been hiding in plain sight for over 2,000 years. This is that story. The documentary hypothesis was developed primarily by German scholars in the 18th and 19th centuries. Their starting observation was reasonable. The Torah contains apparent contradictions, repetitions, and two different names for God: Yud He Vav He. I suspect that's pronounced Yehovah, and Elohim. Their conclusion was that these anomalies were evidence of separate source documents written at different times and spliced together. This framework became the dominant model in academic biblical scholarship, and it still is today. But it rests on a core assumption that the Torah was composed over several centuries, with the earliest material going back to the 10th or 9th century BCE, before the Common Era. And the whole thing reaching its final form sometime in the 5th or 6th century BCE. A scholar named Russell Gamirkin has spent decades systematically dismantling that assumption and replacing it with something far more specific and far more startling. Russell Gamirkin's thesis is this: the entire Pentateuch, all five books of the Torah, was composed around 273 to 272 BCE in Alexandria, Egypt, by a group of Jewish scholars working within the Museum and the Library of Alexandria under the patronage of Ptolemy II Philadelphus. And these were not just any scholars. According to later tradition, these were the very men credited with producing the Septuagint, the first Greek translation of the Hebrew scriptures. In Gamirkin's model, the Hebrew Torah and its Greek translation were not separated by centuries. They were produced at roughly the same time by the same people. How does he know this? By identifying the sources the Torah authors must have had access to. Must have had access to. Excuse me. There's a bookmarks thing that keeps warning, that keeps popping up. Um, In 278 BCE, a Babylonian priest named Berosus completed a history of Mesopotamia written in Greek, the Babyloniaca. It contained Babylonian accounts of creation, a great flood, and extraordinarily long lived ancient kings. Gomerican argues that Genesis chapters 1 through 11, the primeval history, the creation story, Noah's flood, the impossibly long lifespans of the early patriarchs were not drawn from ancient Israelite oral tradition. They were drawn directly from Berosus's written Greek text. This means Genesis could not have been written before 278 BCE. Around 285 BCE, an Egyptian priest named Manetho wrote a history of Egypt in Greek for the Ptolemaic court. His account included a story about foreign people being expelled from Egypt. Gomerican contends that the Exodus narrative was composed in direct response to Manetho, a deliberate rewriting of Egypt's hostile account of expulsion into the heroic story of the Israelites' liberation. Clue number 3. Around 274 to 273 BCE, Ptolemy constructed a canal that featured a newly invented water lock, a mechanism where between two walls of water, the level could be raised or lowered to allow ships to pass through on dry land. Walk between the two walls of Walk between two walls of water on dry land. Sorry. Sound familiar? Gomerican suggests this engineering. I have a warning. Your connection is unstable. All right. Gomerican suggests this engineering marvel was the direct inspiration for the parting of the Red Sea. This detail pushes the earliest possible date of composition to 273 BCE. Clue number 4. In a follow-up book, Gomerican extended his argument to the Torah's legal content. He identified a striking number of parallels between the laws of the Pentateuch and Athenian law, particularly the laws found in Plato's laws, the text called Laws, written around 350 BCE. That's 350 BCE. But the connection goes deeper than the individual laws. Gomerican argues that the very idea of creating a national scripture, a divinely authorized text to govern an entire people, was itself inspired by Plato's laws, which described exactly this kind of theocratic literary project as the foundation of an ideal state. The scholars at Alexandria had Plato's laws on the shelves of the Great Library, and they used it as a blueprint. Here is one of the most powerful pieces of negative evidence in Gomerican's case. In the 5th century BCE, a Jewish military colony existed at Elephantine in Egypt. They left behind dozens of papyrus documents, letters, legal contracts, religious correspondence. These documents have been exhaustively studied, and they contain nothing that suggests any knowledge of the Torah. No reference to the Exodus, no mention of Aaron or the Levites, no trace of the Moses. This colony show no sign of Aaronide descent. If the Torah had been composed and promulgated as the authoritative law of the Jewish people during the Persian period, as the documentary hypothesis requires, this silence would be inexplicable. To Gomerican, it is not inexplicable at all. The Torah simply hadn't been written yet. To understand what makes the Torah so revolutionary, you need to understand the world as it was written about and written against. Because the picture that emerges from archaeology and ancient inscriptions is radically different from the one the Torah presents. The settlements that appear in the highland region BCE were unwalled. They show no evidence of people arriving from outside. Their oval configurations resemble the layouts of pastoral nomad tent settlements. People who were already there, gradually becoming sedentary. The archaeological evidence is unambiguous. The Israelites did not arrive in Canaan from Egypt. They emerged from Canaan. They were Canaanites. Between and enthusiastically, the major deities worshipped alongside Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh included Asherah, understood as Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh's wife, inscriptions from a Sinai way station dating to around 800 BCE bless travelers by Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh of Samaria and his Asherah. A tomb inscription from around 750 BCE does the same. This was not a marginal cult. Baal, the storm god of rain and agricultural fertility. Baal worship appears throughout the Hebrew prophets, not as a foreign import, but as something deeply embedded in the culture. Baal even appears in dozens of Israelite personages within the royal family. The senior Canaanite deity, his titles El Shaddai, El Elyon, El Olam are all preserved in the Torah's own vocabulary. The God of Abraham almost certainly was El, the high god of the Canaanite pantheon. Excuse me while I turn this off. All right. One of the most striking pieces of archaeological evidence is the Judean pillar figurine, a ceramic female figure form with emphasized breasts found in the thousands throughout Judah during the 8th and 7th centuries BCE. In Jerusalem alone, 405 examples have been found. They appear in homes, tombs, temples, and administrative buildings. It has been calculated that there was at least one per household. These figurines are widely interpreted as representations of Asherah associated with fertility and childbirth. The Torah's absolute prohibition, "You shall not make for yourself an idol," was not describing what Israelites did. It was legislating against what they actually practiced in overwhelming numbers right up until the Babylonian exile. The Torah demands a single centralized place of worship, the Jerusalem temple. Archaeology tells the opposite story. Every region had its own sanctuary, its own local deity, its own sacrificial site. The Arad temple, discovered in the Negev, was a fully functional Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh sanctuary in active use from the 10th through the late 7th century BCE, with altars, priestly personnel, and standing stones that the Torah explicitly forbids. Inscriptions from one Sinai way station refer to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh of Samaria and Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh of Taman, as if Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh had distinct local manifestations, a different Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh at each major sanctuary. This is the complete antithesis of the Torah's vision of a single, unified, imageless God. Now I want to scroll down here. All right. Here's something that will reframe how you think about the Torah entirely. The divine name, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, does not originate in Israel. It appears in foreign records long before Israel existed as a kingdom and long before any proposed date for the Torah's composition. On the walls of an Egyptian temple in what is now Sudan, built during the reign of Pharaoh Amenhotep III of the 18th century, the 18th dynasty, there is a geographical list. One entry reads, "The land of the Shasu of YHW." The Shasu were Semitic nomads from the northwestern Arabian Peninsula and Sinai region. The name YHW, rendered in Egyptian hieroglyphs by Egyptian scribes for an Egyptian pharaoh, corresponds precisely to the Hebrew tetragrammaton, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, four Hebrew letters. It predates the Mesha Stela, previously the oldest known occurrence of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, by over 500 years. Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh was not born inside Israelite theology. The name arrived with semi nomadic peoples from the south, from Edom, from Midian, the Sinai region, and was grafted onto the Israelite religious world. The Moabite king Mesha erected a monument to commemorate his military victories. In it, he boasts that he plundered objects dedicated to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh from a conquered Israelite town. He uses the name matter-of-factly, the way you'd name an enemy's god, in a document written entirely from a Moabite perspective. Then, at a way station in the Sinai, Israelite travelers inscribed blessings on pottery and plaster. One reads, may you be blessed by um, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh and by his Asherah. Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh bless you and keep you and be with you. Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh embedded in a polytheistic context with a wife as one deity among many. In Jordan, a plaster text discovered in a non-Israelite context tells visions of Balaam, son of Beor, the same prophet who appears in the book of Numbers. The text uses the divine title Shaddai, one of the Torah's own names for God, in a completely pagan context, associated with a divine council of multiple gods. El Shaddai was a regional divine title shared across Canaanite and Aramaic culture, not an Israelite invention. Now we get to Elohim. The Hebrew word Elohim, used in Genesis for the God who creates the world, did not originate in Hebrew either. Its exact cognate exists in Ugaritic, written here as apostrophe ILHM, because Hebrew vowels are not written in that world, and in Hebrew, vowels are not normally written. Meaning the collective divine assembly, the entire family of El, all the gods together. The word for all the gods at once was Elohim. Even more remarkable, in the Amarna letters, also of the 18th dynasty, diplomatic correspondence from Canaanite city-states to the Egyptian pharaoh, this would be Amenhotep IV, also known as Akhenaten, dating to about 1350 BCE, scribes repeatedly used the plural form of gods with a singular grammatical meaning. They even applied it to the pharaoh himself. The grammatical structure the Torah deploys, in other words, the grammatical structure in the Torah, a plural noun governing a singular verb, was not an Israelite invention. It was a pre-existing Canaanite scribal convention, centuries old, that the Torah authors inherited and then used for the most radical theological purpose imaginable. All right. One of the most fascinating puzzles the Torah presents is the use of two distinct names for God, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh and Elohim. I'm guessing that Yud-Heh, from convincing evidence, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh was pronounced Yehovah. For the documentary hypothesis, this was evidence of two separate authors. For the Torah's architects, as scholar Moshe Klein has demonstrated, it was something else entirely, a deliberate design feature. Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh and Elohim are not two gods. They are two registers of the same God, two different modes of divine engagement with the world. This is what I'm really excited about. Elohim is the cosmic creator, abstract, transcendent, working through natural processes. By the way, I should mention that those of you reading in English translated texts, typically when it says God, the actual Hebrew says Elohim, and typically when it says the Lord, it's Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh in the actual Hebrew, for the most part. That's why when you see, for example, the Lord God, the actual Hebrew is probably Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh Elohim. All right, so we have Elohim as the cosmic creator. I already covered that. Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh is the relational God, present, personal, The God who walks in the garden in the cool of the day, who speaks directly to Abraham, who hears the cry of the enslaved, who makes and keeps covenants with specific people. This distinction is even encoded in the two creation stories at the opening of Genesis. In Genesis 1, Elohim creates a cosmic Adam, humanity in the image of God, given dominion over the earth. Then in Genesis 2, Yud He Vav He forms a different Adam from the dust of the ground, a being placed in a garden, assigned to tend and keep it, made for relationship. Two Adams, two roles, two divine names. And it continues into the genealogies. Eve produces Cain with the help of Yud He Vav He. Eve produces Seth with a seed given by Elohim. See, it's very distinctive once you see the actual Hebrew. Very clear. The divine name is not arbitrary, it is a coordinate telling you which register of divine reality you are operating in. Now, scholar Moshe Klein spent years doing something that almost no one had done before. He set aside the Torah's modern chapter and verse divisions, which were added in the medieval period, and looked for the Torah's own internal divisions. What he found was extraordinary. 86 literary units. Now, keep in mind that number 86, that's going to come in handy. Using structural markers embedded in the text itself, genealogical formulas, geographic envelopes, death and burial notices, and units with unmistakable internal architectural symmetry, Klein identified 86 discrete literary units across the 5 books. Not 85, not 87, exactly 86. And they are distributed with perfect symmetry. Genesis, 19 units. Exodus, 19 units. Leviticus, 22 units. Numbers, 13 units. Deuteronomy, 13 units. So you see the first 2 books have 19 units. The final 2 books have 13 units. The middle book has 22 units. Genesis mirrors Exodus. Numbers mirrors Deuteronomy. Leviticus stands alone at the center. The number 86 did not come from predetermined count. It emerged from the structural analysis. Why 86? In Hebrew, letters carry numerical values. The word Elohim, the cosmic creator name for God, has a gematria value of 86. In other words, if you take each letter of the alphabet and you assign them a numerical value, the first letter is 1, second letter is 2, third letter is so forth. That's what gematria is. Aleph is the first letter is 1 plus Lamed is 30. All right. Aleph 1 plus Lamed 30 plus Hey 5 plus Yod 10 plus Mem 40 equals 86. That's Elohim equaling 86. The Torah is structured into exactly as many units as the numerical value of the name of the God who structures reality. This is not a coincidence, it's a signature. Klein's central insight is that these 86 units are not meant to be read in a straight line. They are arranged in a 2-dimensional grid like threads in a woven fabric. On an ancient loom, 2 sets of threads work together. The warp stretched taut vertically, providing the fixed framework, and the weft woven horizontally through the warp, carrying the content. In the Torah's architecture, the vertical axis is the divine name register. Units in row 1 are dominated by Yud He Vav He, the personal relational God. Units in row 3 are dominated by Elohim, the cosmic transcendent God. Units in row 2 are transitional, where both names appear together and in heaven and earth intersect. The horizontal axis is the thematic track. In Genesis, odd-numbered columns carry the covenant story. Even-numbered columns carry the family story. Every unit in the Torah has both a row and a column. Its position in the grid communicates meaning that its content alone does not reveal. You are not just reading a text, you are reading a coordinate system of meaning. That's very important. The Decalogue, as as source code. Sorry, the Decalogue as source code. The Ten Commandments were not originally a numbered list. They were inscribed on two tablets, 5 commandments each. Klein argues that this 2 by 5 arrangement is the master template, the source code from which the entire woven structure derives. Tablet 1, 5 commandments, governing the relationship between humanity and God. Tablet 2, 5 commandments, governing the relationship between human beings. 2 axes, 5 levels deep. A dual structure with a dual purpose, pairs of 5, propagating upward through it every scale of the text. Now we get to the Torah acrostic. Hidden inside the letter patterns of the Torah itself is one of the most stunning confirmations of this design. Starting with the first occurrence of the Hebrew letter Tav in Genesis and counting every 49th letter, it spells Torah left to right. The same pattern repeats in Exodus, Torah skipping every 49th letter. In Numbers and Deuteronomy, the same pattern appears but spelled backwards, pointing towards the center. So you have the first 2 books with the word Torah spelled in one direction towards the center, and the final 2 Leviticus and the final 2 books having the same Torah at 49th letter skip pattern. Deuteronomy has it at 48th letter skip pattern towards Leviticus. And in Leviticus, at every 7th letter, the divine name Yud He Vav He appears. So you have, you may know 7 is symbolic. There's 7 letters or 7 days of the week. You rest on the 7th day. That's Shabbat. There's something about 7 every 7th year. You forgive the debts and so forth. That's written in Torah code, Torah commandments. And then the 49th year or 50th year is the Jubilee year. That makes sense. 7 times 7 is 49. So it makes sense. At a 49, the authors writing this would put Torah at a 49-letter skip pattern, and then the middle book would have the divine name at a 7-letter skip pattern. The 5 books do not form a simple line. They form a cross. A vertical thread, Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers. Sorry, I'll move it over a bit. Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers tells the visible story, the slavery, revelation, the wilderness. The horizontal thread, Exodus, your horizontal thread, Genesis, Leviticus, again, Leviticus in the middle, and Deuteronomy is the hidden thread. These 3 non-consecutive books share a deep structural connection. All 3 are organized into rows of 3-unit groups. Leviticus is the intersection point, the hinge, the locked center of both threads simultaneously. The Torah is not 5 books in a row. It is a plus sign, vertical, horizontal intersection, with the entire weight of the composition balanced at a single pivot. Leviticus, the central book, contains exactly 22 units, the same number as the letters in the Hebrew alphabet. The Hebrew is the foundational inventory of all language. Placing 22 units at the center of the Torah encodes the idea that the whole alphabet, all of language, all of meaning, is concentrated at the Torah's heart. The gematria of Yud He Vav He, that is Yod 10, He 5, Vav 6, He 5 equals 26. 26 is also the number of generations from Adam to Moses in the Torah's genealogies. Now, look at the names of the patriarchs. Isaac, the gematria of the name Isaac is 208. That's 26 times 8. Jacob equals 182. That's 26 times 7. And Joseph is 156. That's 26 times 6. So in the order, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph, in their birth order, you have 26 times 8, 26 times 7, 26 times 6. Every name is a multiple of 26, the number of the divine name, descending in order toward Joseph. Now we get to the lifespans. Scholar Casper, I'll attempt this name, Labuschagne, 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 identified an even more intricate system in the patriarch's lifespans. Each lifespan factors into three numbers whose sum is always 17, the gematria of an archaic form of Yud He Vav He. Abraham lived 175 years. That's 5 times 5 times 7. And 5 plus 5 plus 7 equals 17. Isaac lived 180 years. That's 6 times 6 times 5, and 6 plus 6 plus 5 equals 17. Jacob lived 147 years. That's 7 times 7 times 3, and that's 7 plus 7 plus 3 equaling 17. You may also see a pattern. So you have three columns. You have Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. You have we have basically 5 squared times 7, 6 squared times 5, and 7 squared times 3. So one column would be of the squareds would be ascending 5, 6, 7, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. The other column is descending 7, 5, 3. And those are the I believe the root numbers, there's a term for it in mathematics, the root numbers that aren't multiples. I forget the term. Joseph's lifespan is 110 years. Joseph comes after Jacob. He's one of Jacob's sons. He lives to 110 years. That's 5 squared plus 6 squared plus 7 squared. So you have the, remember that column that had 5 squared, 6 squared, 7 squared. Well, if you add those up themselves, you get 110, which would be Joseph's lifespan. The literal arithmetic sum of the squared factors from all three patriarchs above him. Joseph is the mathematical culmination of his ancestors. Joseph, okay, and it goes on one level deeper still. The total gematria of every verse in the Genesis creation narrative, Genesis 1 through 2, chapter 2, verse 3, sums to 110,601. The 601 seems anomalous until you notice 601 is the 110th prime number. Prime number, that's what I was looking for. The numerical value of the creation week equals 110,000 plus the 110th prime number. Genesis ends with Joseph dying at the age of 110. His lifespan is not just the sum of his forefathers, it sums up the whole of creation. Now, I want to add further about what I was saying before about that gematria. So it's not a matter of haphazard or random names, random choosing in what names there were for Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph. Those are, well, let's say the odds are stacked against them, the names being picked at random. It's more like the author probably had a number pattern and had to find names or create names that would fit that numerical pattern in terms of gematria. Now we get to Abraham's 248. The gematria of the name Abraham equals 248. According to the Mishnah, which is a collection, basically Judah the prince created a collection of guidelines, commandments, perhaps traditions, called the Mishnah, and then later commentaries added onto it, and then that's what we have as the Talmud. According to the Mishnah, 248 is the number of limbs and major bones in the human body. The Torah contains exactly 248 positive commandments corresponding to the 248 limbs. It also contains exactly 365 negative commandments corresponding to the 365 days of the year and the major nerves and sinews of the body. Now, when I say positive and negative, What I mean is by positive commandment, it's not a value judgment. It's positive commandments are things you must do, and negative commandments are things you must not do. So there are 248 positive commandments of things you must do, and 365 commandments of things you must not do. The Torah is structured as a body. As I said before, the 248 corresponding to the 248 limbs, the 365 corresponding to the major nerves and sinews of the body. So the Torah is structured as a body. The laws are its anatomy, and the first man to receive positive commandments wears his number in his name. There's even a deeper etymological layer. The first three letters of Abraham's name, Aleph, Bet, Resh, or in English, I suppose, A, B, or V, depending on how you pronounce the second letter, B or V, hard or soft. Aleph, or A, B, R, can be permuted to spell bara, the Hebrew verb meaning created. The last two letters have a numerical value equal to the word Adam. The gematria of Abraham equals the gematria of the phrase he created Adam. The entire human story is folded into the name of the man who answered the first call. To write the Torah, the scholars at Alexandria needed sources, and in 273 BC, they had the greatest library in the world at their disposal. Gamirkan identifies the primary literary sources as Berossus's Babyloniaca, the Babylonian creation and flood accounts, that shaped Genesis 1 through 11. Manetho's Aegyptiaca, the Egyptian history whose account of foreign expulsion in the Torah rewrote as the Exodus. Plato's Laws, the philosophical blueprint for theocratic government through national scripture that inspired the Torah's legal architecture. Babylonian wisdom literature, including the Babylonian Theodicy, that's Theodicy, a sophisticated acrostic poem from around 1000 BCE whose themes of divine justice and human suffering have deep affinities with the book of Job. Greek mathematical and numerological traditions, including Pythagorean isopsephy, ICOPSEPHY, the practice of assigning numerical values to letters. The Milesian, Milesian letter numbering system was officially adopted in Egypt during the reign of Ptolemy II, the same king who sponsored the Torah's composition. The scholars were living in the moment when Greek gematria was being formally institutionalized around them. You also had, or the writer or writers who created the Torah, presumably also had the Assyrian royal inscription practice. The king Sargon II had famously built the walls of Khorsabad to measure exactly 16,283 cubits, the numerical value of his own name. Encoding a ruler's numerical identity into the physical architecture of his creation was already royal practice 3 centuries before the Torah. The Torah author was not inventing techniques. He was a master synthesizer, a scholar at the precise historical moment when Babylonian, Greek, and Egyptian literary and numerological traditions were fusing together in one library, applying all of it to a new composition with extraordinary intentionality. All right. Before we close, it is worth asking the most practical question of all. How did someone actually write this thing? The year is approximately 273 BCE. You are in Alexandria. You do not have a keyboard. You do not have a delete key. You do not have a searchable text. You cannot open 2 windows side by side. You have a reed pen. You have a reed pen, ink, papyrus scrolls, correction tools, and the wax tablet. A reed pen, a hard reed split at the tip and cut into a nib, requiring constant resharpening. The Greeks had refined this from the softer brush reed used by Egyptian scribes. It was capable of finer, more precise strokes, but it needed maintenance. Ink, a fine carbon powder, lamp black, mixed with gum arabic and water. Black, permanent, and largely irremovable. Papyrus scrolls, the dominant writing surface in Alexandria for nearly 3,000 years, made by slicing the pith of the papyrus plant into strips and pressing them in perpendicular layers, not as absorbent as paper, rough enough for ink to adhere, but easily damaged by smoothing. A standard scroll held about 4,000 to 5,000 words. The Torah runs to approximately 79,000 Hebrew words, meaning it would have required, at minimum, 15 to 20 standard scrolls. Correction tools. Scribes could not simply delete, that would have been too easy. Errors were erased with a damp cloth or scraped away with sandstone or pumice. But scraping, excuse me, but scraping papyrus damaged its surface, thinning and roughening it, making it harder for fresh ink to adhere. A heavily corrected passage becomes a physical mess. There was no clean revision. And one crucial technology, the wax tablet. A shallow wooden frame filled with dark beeswax, a stylus, metal, bone, or hardwood, with a pointed end for writing and a flat end for smoothing. Because wax accepted a fine point and allowed instant revision, just smooth it flat and begin again. Wax tablets were the ancient world's working documents. You drafted on wax, revised on wax. When the draft was clean, you transferred it to papyrus. This was the workflow for composing the Torah. This is what I like to call the, no pun intended, when the rubber meets the road. How did they actually write this text? First, preliminary reading of sources: Berosus, Manetho, Plato, the Babylonian wisdom literature, taking notes on wax tablets. Then, drafting sections on wax, revising freely until each unit was right. Then, transferring clean drafts to papyrus as semi-final copies. Then, reviewing those copies, making corrections in the interlinear spaces or by careful overwriting. Finally, commissioning the clean, fair copy, the definitive scroll. Now consider what Moshe Klein's analysis requires: 86 interlocking literary units, each carrying a precise position in a Torah-wide two-dimensional matrix, with divine name distributions organized by row, thematic tracks organized by column, chiastic structures nested at multiple scales, verbal echoes linking units that are dozens of sections apart, and gematria patterns encoded in names, lifespans, and structural counts, all composed without a delete key, without searchable text, without copy and paste, on surfaces that physically degraded when corrected. The author could not control F, control F, to find where he had used a word 40 sections earlier. He could not open two scrolls side by side to check that Unit 5 and Unit 12, which are meant to echo each other across the matrix, were properly aligned. He would have had to carry the entire architecture in memory, or maintain a separate system of wax tablets, mapping the structural skeleton, referring back constantly, committing the final result to scrolls in a linear sequence that deliberately concealed the two-dimensional structure it encoded. Whether the Torah was composed by one author or a small team, the cognitive and craft discipline required is almost unimaginable by modern standards. The Torah has been read for over 2,000 years as a religious text, a historical document, a legal code, a mythological collection. Scholars have debated its authorship and dating for centuries. But what Gemirkin and Klein together suggest is something that neither the religious traditionalist nor the critical scholar has fully reckoned with. The Torah may have been the most sophisticated literary artifact ever composed. That's why I find this so important to make a video about. Not a patchwork of ancient fragments, not a simple mythology, a single, unified, deliberately engineered architecture built by scholars who had access to every major literary tradition of the ancient world, who understood numerology in three languages, who could design a text that operates simultaneously as a story, a law code, a philosophical treatise, a mathematical object, and a theological argument, and who then encoded all of this in a sequence of ink marks on papyrus scrolls that would survive every empire, every exile, every catastrophe down to this moment. Whether you read it as scripture or as literature, whether you approach it with faith or with scholarship, you are holding something extraordinary. The question is not whether it was divinely inspired. The question is, have you been paying close enough attention? So I have production notes down here. I want to mention that I now that I have gotten this off my chest, there's another book, another bit of research that could coincide with this. It doesn't negate it. In fact, I found in some places it could go alongside it but from a different point of view, still along the same track, but from a different researcher. That's Stan Tenen. So this is like the foundation, the introductory video, and I intend to do more videos on this topic. I hope you liked it. Thank you very much for those who stuck by watching this, and I'll talk with you next time. Bye.